Okay, so the first thing we're going to talk about here are your five Australian dietary guidelines. Yeah, so there's five dietary guidelines that we follow that are kind of like generalized things that set out forth by the Australian government. And they are going to be on the left side here. Okay, so there's going to be a little bit of typing and writing down here, but let's go through them all. So the first one is to achieve and maintain a healthy weight, be physically active, and choose amounts of nutritious food and drinks to meet your energy needs. So it's, a lot of this stuff when the government starts parroting this stuff out, it's pretty generalized, but this is the overall message that the Australian government is, trying to push, okay, in terms of improving healthy eating. Now, you have to really kind of assume here that not everybody is like us three in terms of having a decent understanding of nutrition and health and fitness and exercise. A lot of people have grown up and their nutritional beliefs have just been what their parents did, and their parents probably thought it was okay to eat like crap all the time and, and to not eat fruits and vegetables and to not get a wide variety of sources of food and to eat no fiber or to drink soft drink or to smoke cigarettes and drink alcohol. So you've got to understand that we need to try and like bring up the base level of nutrition knowledge in this whole country, right? So a lot of this stuff's going to be very general, but we can adapt it to meet our clients' needs, okay? So if we want to maintain a healthy weight, we need to be physically active, okay? And we need to choose the right amount of food and drinks to meet your energy needs. So what does that mean? Like when they're talking about that, as you can see on the right here, is if you're trying to lose weight, obviously we need more exercise and less input, right? So we want to create a calorie deficit if you're trying to lose weight, right? So we need you to move more, be more physically active, and for you, the right amount of food is going to be less than what you're currently eating. It really is as simple as that. As much as people want to try and confuse weight loss, it always boils down to calories in versus calories out, Okay? So we want to create a calorie deficit if we're trying to lose weight, and then we want to increase our energy expenditure. We want to increase the amount of calories we burn every day through activity and exercise. So I always break up activity and exercise. Activity is just you being active over the course of a day, right? That's the concept of the 10,000 steps per day. Whereas exercise is a structured exercise session. I'm going to go to the gym, or I'm going to go for a 5K run, or I'm going to go lift weights, or I'm going to do whatever, okay? What's funny is a lot of people go to the gym, push themselves through a really half-assed, low-intensity workout and think that they can now sit on the couch for the rest of the day, right? Whereas the person that's active all day walking 15,000 steps but not going to the gym is burning more calories than them. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Yeah, so we've got to find a mix. We've got to get people to do both. So not only are you going to the gym, training 3 to 4 days a week, but you've got to hit your 10,000 steps a day. Or for you, it might be more. It might be 12,000. Or you might be starting from a really low base and it might be 5,000 or 6,000, right? And the last one is we want to look for energy-dense, nutritious foods. Yeah, so when I mean energy-dense, I mean healthy, nutritious, energy-dense food so that we don't have to eat a lot of it, right? So we want to be choosing fruit and veg and healthy fats and lean sources of protein and low GI carbs, sweet potatoes and all that sort of stuff, okay? So that's the first dietary guideline. The second one is enjoying a wide variety of foods from the 5 food groups every day, okay? So think about 2 types of population. James will relate to me. Young kids, yeah? When was the last time your kids ate something green? Sometimes they can go 3 days without eating something green, hey?
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, I know. I've got a 5-year-old and a 2-year-old. I know exactly what it's like, right? So, and it's the same with elderly people. Elderly people might eat the same 8 to 10 foods every single day, right? So they could be missing complete food groups. They could be having 0 serves of fruit a day or 0 serves of vegetables a day. So we need to create an awareness around eating a whole food-based balanced diet, having a balance of your macronutrients. So that's carbohydrates, proteins, and fat. Yeah. So making sure that we're getting the appropriate amount of all of them. One of the first things I see with old clients is, what do you think old clients aren't eating, elderly people aren't eating enough of? Carbs, protein, or fat?
Fat.
Probably protein, to be honest. Their protein intake is disastrously low, most of them, right? They eat very, very little protein, right? And they eat too many carbohydrates and they eat just too much fat. Old people eat biscuits and pastries and shit till the cows come home. You know what I mean? So there's nothing in there for them, right? So we need to make sure they've got a balanced intake of carbohydrates, protein, and fat. And then we need to make sure that they're getting sufficient micronutrients. So macronutrients are your big ones, your carbs, your proteins, and fats. But micronutrients are your vitamins and your minerals. Yeah. So are they getting enough vitamin B, vitamin C, vitamin D, vitamin K, vitamin A, all that sort of stuff, right? So we need to make sure that these clients are eating a balanced diet. Okay. You'd be shocked. You would assume most people do, but if you got them to fill in a weekly food plan, you're like, oh, I didn't realize you don't eat anything green. You know, so these are the things that we need to fix. Okay. Now, the third one, guys, is pretty simple: limiting the intake of food containing added salt, added sugars, added fat, all the bad stuff. Yeah. Okay. So if we're going to take out that type of food, usually that's the food that's really calorie dense. So naturally, by reducing junk, we're going to decrease our calorie intake. Okay, so that's going to be the first benefit. All right, we're going to get less calories in. Okay. If you try and eat 200 calories from a donut or 200 calories from broccoli, you're eating a whole lot of broccoli, right? So we take out the junk, we decrease the calorie intake. The second thing, as you can see here, what's so important is all of a sudden now their energy levels become more stable. Yeah. Do you guys know what it's like to ride like the sugar roller coaster?
Yeah, it sucks.
Yeah. You know, like when you're really tired, you crave sugar. Hey, why? Because it's like the simplest, easiest form of fuel that your brain can use, right? So if you've conditioned your body to always get hits of sugar or fat or junk, your body's so used to using that type of energy, right? So I always use my analogy here is a fire, right? So I go, when you're putting newspaper on a fire, that's like putting sugar on a fire. That's like eating sugar. It burns really quickly, but it burns away, and you're going to need more and more of it to keep that fire going. Yeah. But I'll say protein is like putting twigs on a fire. So or putting sticks on a fire. Give you a good amount of energy. They keep you going for a decent amount of time. But putting fat on a fire is like putting a big fat log. Eating an avocado or salmon or, you know, a really dense energy source, high source of good fats. That's going to have you burning for long periods of time. It's going to make you feel full. It's going to keep the fire going. Yeah. So we don't want to start a fire with just using newspaper, because you have to keep feeding newspaper. It's the same thing with sugar, right? So we want stable energy levels. We reduce our trans fat intake. So trans fats are the worst type of fats. They're the hydrogenated fats. They're the ones that are basically directly linked to heart attacks. Think pastries, pies, biscuits, donuts, cupcakes, all that sort of stuff. And the last thing, obviously, if we're cutting out sugar, then we're not going to have as much stress on the pancreas, because that produces insulin every time we eat sugar. And then if we're cutting out alcohol, we're going to decrease the load on the liver. Yeah, so we're going to get all these benefits, okay? And for a lot of people, it's not so much making changes to their diet. It's not so much about what they should be eating. It's cutting out what they shouldn't be eating. Yeah, that's really vital, okay? So it's all about trying to replace and change this to this, not eat nothing, but instead of eating this, why don't you try this?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Are we good with those three?
Yep.
Okay. Number 4 is, promote support for healthy breastfeeding. Okay. So that's a very niche one. Obviously, that's just for pregnant clients. Obviously, the Australian government wants to promote breastfeeding. Breast is best. You hear it at the hospitals and stuff all the time. All the studies point to the fact that breastfeeding is the best thing for infants in their first 6 to 12 months of life. Unfortunately, obviously, not every kid can be breastfed, and not every mother can breastfeed for the appropriate amount of time. And also, I guess, not every mother wants to breastfeed. But anyway, that's what we try and promote. Natural nutrition for the child, okay? I don't know if you guys know this, James. You might know this, Logan. You probably don't, right? When a woman breastfeeds their child, right, when the child sucks on the nipple, right, the saliva that hits the nipple and the hormones that get sent through to the mother will change the composition of their breast milk depending on what that child is lacking. Isn't that wild? Think about that. So let's say you've got a baby and the baby needs more iron in the milk,
Yep.
right? The mother's nipple will sense that in the saliva and it will produce more iron in the breast milk to give to the baby.
Wow.
So like it literally really is like the natural best form of nutrition for the child, right? So that's the concept there, right? And like I said, not everyone can breastfeed. It is also personal choice, but you will hear that a lot, that they promote it. And another one is also that it increases prolactin. So when the mother breastfeeds, it releases a hormone called prolactin, and that actually is associated with increased bonding with the child as well. So there's all sorts of positive health outcomes for the mother and the child in terms of bonding through breastfeeding. Okay. And the last one is take care of your food, prepare it and store it safely. For obvious reasons, right? No food poisoning, no salmonella, no cross-contamination, no eating shit past its use-by date, all that sort of stuff, right? Simple stuff, but we do sometimes forget that, okay? All right, so they're the 5 guys, okay? Obviously, the first 3 are the most important, right? Numbers 4 and number 5 are just more of a bit of an afterthought, but they're the things that the Australian government has really focused on, really kind of hammering down in regards to that, okay? All right, if you didn't get it all, that's okay, guys. Just a couple of bullet points is totally fine. Okay, so question 2, the role of the personal trainer in regards to providing nutritional advice for your clients. This is an interesting one because this is a line that personal trainers toe all the time. So we're talking about like one-on-one PTs, right?
Yep.
How much information, how much advice can you give and how much can't you give in terms of the scope of your practice? Now, I know in reality, we all probably give advice that's probably a bit past the scope of what a personal trainer is. Like we give a lot of nutrition advice, have you tried this type of protein or maybe this sort of supplement? Now, look, technically we're not supposed to do that. I'm not saying, that happens all the time, but ideally in a perfect world, we're giving general recommendations according to the Australian guidelines of healthy eating, right? Yep. We only do it to low risk clients. So if a client has an established medical condition or nutritional concern, we cannot provide them with nutritional advice. They have to be referred to a nutritionist or a dietitian, right? That's fair enough, right? That makes sense. You wouldn't want to be giving them any information that makes them feel worse. We can't prescribe them diets, okay? A lot of PTs will, but we're technically not allowed to prescribe diets, and we can't diagnose any nutritional-based conditions. So you can't tell a client, you have celiac disease or you are lactose intolerant, all right? Because you haven't done the blood work, you haven't done the testing. You might have a fair idea, every time I drink milk, I get bloated and I fart all the time, right? But we can't actually physically diagnose. I mean, obviously, right? And the whole thing is, guys, when in doubt, refer out, right? If it's something outside your scope, you're unaware, if they've got some sort of weird blood-borne illness or if they have a certain type of thing that requires them to only eat this, X, Y, Z, I can't eat this, I can't drink that, refer them out. Makes sense, guys? Pretty simple. Stay within your scope. I recommend this, I recommend that. If you've got any more questions, best to see a nutritionist, right? And then if you start working closely with a nutritionist, one of the best things with that is you can create a relationship where they can send you business, you can send their business, and then everyone kind of, works together and ends up working out for each other. Okay. Alrighty, the next one, guys, is we're going to talk about what could be some of the dangers with providing a medical nutritional advice. Guys, what's the first one? Is it pregnant women?
Yep. Yes.
Yeah, okay, so the first one. So 2 risks in providing nutritional information to pregnant women. So the first one is obviously complications with the baby can occur. So anything from, issues with the baby growing at the right amount of weight and all that sort of stuff. And then the other one could be excessive weight gain or weight loss in the mother, right? So, what's can be really dangerous is obviously prescribing a really low calorie diet to a pregnant mother who's trying to grow a baby, and she needs more calories at this time. And then so she's going to be underweight, and that can cause issues there as well. Okay. All right. What's the next one, guys? Because I don't have it in front of me.
Underweight individuals.
Okay, so underweight individuals. So if we provide the risk and the information is further worsening their health condition, okay, so they could become more underweight. What might be another risk of providing nutritional information to underweight individuals?
Unhealthy like weight gain as well.
Yeah, so yeah, it can unhealthy weight gain due to like a focus on bad foods or like processed foods or high calorie foods. Yeah. So it's really tempting to just say, oh, just eat whatever you want. Just eat cheeseburgers and milkshakes all day. Right. But that's probably going to make them feel worse. I was always told, well, I played rugby union and I was always told that I had to gain weight, right? So I had to put on about 10 kilos to play at a decent weight. And I was eating a whole roast chicken for lunch 6 days a week when I was about 22. And I felt like absolute shit doing it. I absolutely hated it. Broke out in acne, had no energy, put on all the weight, but felt like shit. So it's like, what's the point, right? The third one is impaired glucose tolerance. That means you've got high blood sugar, all right? So you could have symptoms such as high or low blood sugar. So if you get your client to have no sugar, they could crash, right? And then the second.
So one was symptoms in.
Yeah. So you could have symptoms of low blood sugar.
Yep.
What happens when you get low blood sugar, James? How do you feel?
Crash.
Yeah, dizzy, weak, faint. Yep. And then also bad nutrition information you say could progress the condition to diabetes. Good. Okay, the next one. Type 2 diabetes. So if you've got a client that got high blood sugar, what could be some of the risks of their condition getting worse? So type 2 diabetics are usually very overweight, right? Yeah. So if you're giving the wrong type of advice, you could further elevate their blood sugar levels, causing weight gain. So that's definitely a risk if you're telling them to eat the wrong types of foods. And then the second one, if left untreated, could lead to circulation problems. So that's a big one with diabetes, okay? If diabetes stays uncontrolled, what happens is the blood sugar levels stay too high and you start getting circulation problems. Have you ever seen a diabetic's legs and they've got those big fat purple legs? Yeah. They're kind of gross. Yeah, that's what you want to try and avoid, okay?
Why does that occur?
So literally, sugar in your bloodstream dissolves the blood vessels, right? So if you've got too much sugar in your bloodstream over long periods of time, it dissolves the blood vessels. Now, the sugar is gonna pull in the legs further away from the heart, right? Because gravity means that blood has to pump against gravity to come back up to the heart. So if you're overweight and you've got blood pulling your legs and the blood's full of sugar, it literally dissolves the blood vessels away and you get those gross purple legs. And that's why they've got to wear like those diabetic compression stockings and they've got to go through treatments. And sometimes my uncle, before he died of type 2 diabetes, he lost a foot. They had to cut a foot off. Wow. Yeah, it's wild, man. It's really rough. Food allergy. So obviously one of the risks is triggering the food allergy. So obviously if you're unaware or you give them something that's got nuts in them, it can be almost life-threatening.
Yep.
So can trigger the food allergy. What would be another risk in providing nutritional information? Oh, you could just say giving advice on foods where you're unaware that. Oh, hang on. What's the best way to explain this?
Legal ramifications.
Yeah, more like giving like I'm trying to say something more like being unaware that a food contains the allergic ingredient or something like that. Yeah. Yeah. So like, oh, here's a recipe for XYZ. Oh, does it contain nuts in it? No. Surely it doesn't, right? And then it does, or it's in the nut powder, or it's somewhere else, or whatever. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, so recovering from cancer. So if we don't give the right amount of advice, we're probably not going to re-trigger cancer due to poor nutritional choices, but definitely lack of weight gain. Yeah. So if we're not giving them the right amount of advice, they get lack of weight gain. And also, eating the wrong types of food. So eating inflammatory foods. So processed foods create like an inflammatory sort of process in the body that can lead to increased pain. Yeah, eating inflammatory processed foods can lead to more pain. All right, the frail elderly. Lack of muscle mass gain and low bone density. So the first one could be lack of muscle gain due to insufficient protein or due to low protein intake. And the last one could be low bone density due to low calcium intake. Right? So if we're not giving them the right types of advice in terms of eating foods that contain those things. Okay, this is a good one. I'll open this one up to you guys. Number 8, mental illness. What can be how can nutrition trigger mental illnesses, and what types of nutritional choices might trigger it?
I know, like after eating, like say Macca's or something, you come down from it, sort of thing. So
Yeah. Okay, yeah. So
KFC.
yes, yeah. So you could say like highly processed foods or foods high in sugar creating energy fluctuations or like energy crashes.
Yep.
That's a big one, because if you've already feeling low or depressed or anxious, that's going to make you feel 10 times more, yeah?
Yep.
And then the second one could be like increased alcohol as a coping mechanism.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, because a lot of people do that. And that could lead to other problems such as liver damage, right?
But that's not something we'd prescribe to them.
No, but it's just kind of like, yeah, I guess, but I would still include that as a risk of basically maybe not asking about their alcohol intake. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And not recommending, because we can obviously recommend we need to decrease alcohol intake. So if you're not picking that up, then that would be one. Yep. Athletes,
the other thing might be their ethical boundary.
Yeah,
like
most definitely.
If they're vegan or something like that, and you're saying, banging on about eating protein and steak and all this stuff, and that could make them unstable.
Yeah, that's another one as well. Mental illness, eating disorders. Yeah, definitely. Definitely. Have you guys heard of, so there's a few eating disorders. Obviously there's anorexia, right? There's bulimia, which is like the binge, purge, eat, throw up sort of one. Have you guys heard of orthorexia?
No.
Orthorexia is an obsession with eating perfect, healthy food. So that is actually like, think about the bodybuilder that eats steamed chicken breasts and broccoli for 8 weeks in a row. And if they eat one piece of chocolate, they feel like they've put on 6 pounds of fat. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So orthorexia is definitely definitely an eating disorder, just as much as, people think, it must be so good you eat so clean, but that can also be a curse. Like those sorts of people are nightmares to hang out with, right? You go out to eat with them. It's awful.
Boring.
Okay, athletes. All right, so incorrect calorie consumption to meet their training needs. That's a big one, right? So athletes not getting enough in to meet their training needs, which means they feel flat, which means they increase their injury risk. That's usually the problem. That's why like a sports dietitian would help here, because athletes have a hard time actually accurately calculating how much food they need to manage their training load. What could be another risk for an athlete?
Poor performance.
Yep. Due to how would nutrition play a part in that?
Like hydration is a
excellent.
big one.
Great one. Excellent. Yep. Insufficient hydration leading to poor performance. That's a great example. James, did you ever did they ever do sweat testing on you when you were playing?
Yeah.
So the reason why that's important is that everyone sweats differently, right? Everyone has a different amount of sodium, potassium, magnesium, and chloride that they actually lose in their sweat. So if you can understand what you lose in your sweat individually, they can create tailored drinks or tailored sort of replenishment systems for you that would work best for you, right? And that's a massive benefit. So they like put a little patch on your skin and do all that?
Patch, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
And do they give you any advice on you should be having more potassium, more magnesium, any of that?
Mate, I can't remember, to be honest.
Okay. They probably did.
I wasn't even into it back then. I was like, they're putting a patch on or they're putting a bloody GPS tracker in your back, and you just don't really
Yeah.
Just didn't really. And whereas now I'd be like, oh, well, what was it? What's your how much did we run in that session and all that sort of stuff?
And you know what? I bet you would love to know how much you sweat now, because now when you're training, you could mix a drink that has a bit more salt or a bit more magnesium, and it would probably improve your performance. You know what I mean?
Yeah, right.
So anyway,
100%.
look, okay, food labels can be confusing for clients to understand. You'd be shocked at how many people don't know how to read food labels properly. Yeah? Okay, so provide 4 tips that will assist clients in understanding food labels. So here's 4 that I've got. This is the first one, which is more of an Australian guideline. Generally choose food with less than 10% fat. I mean, that's not a hard and fast rule, because obviously, an avocado is going to have a lot more than that. And generally, we aim for the lowest saturated fat. The only reason why we do that is just to, in general, reduce their calorie consumption, right? So we want to be understanding, turning a packet of food over and going, okay, here's the fat content here. Is that less than 10%? All right, so that's the first one. Okay, the next 3 are sort of the ones that I think that are really important, right? So that's for me is understanding serving sizes as a percentage of the entire food. And for me, cereal's the biggest culprit, right? So if you got a box of cornflakes, right, and you turned it over and they would say 1 serving size is like 3/4 of a cup, right? Or half a cup. You and I would therefore eat 5 serving sizes for breakfast, right? So then on the front of the packet, they can go, oh, this is only 120 calories per serving. But what you don't realize is you're actually eating 4 or 5 servings at one go, right? Mm-hmm. So you always need to get clients to understand, okay, have a look at, like when you buy a 600 ml Coke, how many servings is that? Do you guys know?
10.
No, it's an average is 250 mils. It's 2.4 servings, okay? When was the last time you bought a 600 ml Coke and didn't drink it all in one go, right? So you're drinking 2.4 serves. So you're actually, instead of drinking 23 grams of sugar, you're actually drinking like 55, 56 grams of sugar, right? So
what's in a beer, mate?
A beer?
How many serves? Yeah.
Beer is about, a beer is what, 140-ish calories usually, okay? Alcohol it depends on your low carbs versus your whatevers, right? But they're about 140 to 150 calories per serving, and about 90 of those calories come directly from alcohol, okay? Wow. Now, here's the sneaky thing with alcohol. Alcohol goes through the stomach and it hits the liver, right? And the liver processes alcohol. That's where your body burns out alcohol, in the liver, not in the stomach. So when you drink a beer, it'll take everything else except for the alcohol. It'll process that through your digestive system. It'll take the alcohol from the beer, the 4% or the 5%, and it'll take that to the liver. The liver processes the alcohol. As a byproduct of processing alcohol, your liver creates fat cells, right?
Yeah, right.
Alcohol can make you, sounds weird, alcohol can make you fat even in a calorie deficit. Because the byproduct of processing alcohol creates fat within the body. That's just how your body breaks it down. It's one of the metabolic processes.
So, some like Alcos, they look real skinny.
Yeah.
Gaunt. How does that work?
Yeah, because I would say, now when I say fat, I don't mean fat that gets stored, for example, around your love handles. It can be fat that freely circulates in the system. It can be fat that goes around your organs. If they did a DEXA scan, I guarantee you they look like shit on the inside. I call it TOFI, TOFI, thin outside, fat inside, right? And that's a big issue as well, massive issue. So that's one there. Okay, number 3 is understanding the difference. So I should say difference between total carbs and added sugars, right? So what you can do is when you look at a food label, it will say the number of carbohydrates, but also say how much of those carbohydrates are sugars, right? And that's important to look at, right? Because you can have 2 foods that have the same carbohydrates, but one of them is 80% sugar, whereas the other one might be only 10% sugar and the rest will be like complex carbohydrates. Okay, so when they're comparing to carbs by carbs, you want to see which one has the highest amount of sugar.
So, man, what's the process between carbohydrates and sugars producing insulin?
So carbohydrates are typically broken down into the simple carbohydrates, which have a very short chain of carbohydrate molecules, 3 or 4, right? They get broken down very quickly, which means they raise your blood sugar levels very quickly. Okay.
Right.
When your blood sugar levels go up quickly, your body goes, oh, I have to produce insulin to bring those blood sugars down. Okay. So think about a quick burst of energy, quick spurt of insulin. Now, when you eat complex carbohydrates like oats and rye and grains and sweet potato and quinoa and pasta and rice and all that sort of stuff, it's an 8-chain molecule. So it takes a lot longer for all those chains to break down, which means the release of sugars into your system is a lot slower, right? Okay. All carbohydrates turn to sugar eventually. The only difference is how fast do they turn to sugar, right? So the load, we call that the GI, the glycemic index, is how fast does it raise your blood sugar, right? So sugar is very quick, whereas something like sweet potatoes, because there's lots of fiber in there. So if that carbohydrate molecule has fiber attached to it, it takes a lot longer for you to break that down because the fiber slows the breaking down of the carbohydrate.
So the insulin is to balance out the blood sugar.
Exactly.
And the result of that is fat.
If your body does not burn that blood sugar, yes, right? So what happens is, right? So the blood, okay, so this is a really good sort of biology. So the sugar goes into your bloodstream, right? The blood pushes it to your muscles. Insulin is the key that unlocks the door to allow the carbohydrate to go into your muscles, okay? Let's say your muscles are already full, right? Because you haven't exercised or you're eating too much. Then the body goes, okay, I'm going to try and put it in my liver. Let's say your liver's full, the body's going to store it as fat, right? So any excess energy that your body doesn't use in the muscles or in the liver, your body's going to store it as fat, okay? So protein goes to your muscles, yeah? And typically we don't turn protein into fat. We don't break it down to fat very often. But carbohydrates excessively, if we don't use them in the muscles or we store them in the liver, we turn them into fat cells. We send them to the fat cells, okay? And then if your blood sugar is high over long periods of time, and your body's always producing insulin, your pancreas goes, stuff this, I'm done. I give up. And that's when you get diabetes, right? Yeah. And that's when you start to need injections.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So it can be quite complex, but just the concept is it's basically use it or store it. You know what I mean? If you're looking at someone and they're quite overweight, what I basically see is it's like they've got a fridge full of food that they need to eat. And by eat I mean burn. Yeah. They're carrying all this excess energy that they need to burn. Whereas if I see someone that's very lean, I'm like, that person doesn't have a lot of excess energy to burn. We've got to fuel them with more energy.
That's perfect. And so I don't want to hold everyone up, but that's perfect already, because the thing is with most people that are overweight and they say, I can't lose weight. And then once they say, we've got to eat less, because everyone knows that, or have not eat less, but have less calories.
Yeah.
Is then they start having issues with the cravings, you know, and they're like, well, this is not working, and it stops. But if you can explain it in that way, you know,
can I also tell you a really good way to explain cravings to your clients? This is how I explain it to them, okay? Your gut, so the bacteria in your gut where you process and digest and absorb your food, they get used to certain types of food, right? So if you spend your whole life eating sugary food, your gut loves it. The bacteria in your gut go, yes, sugar, I can feed on this, I can grow, I can get bigger, whatever. It's bacteria, right?
Yeah.
As soon as you stop eating that food, the gut goes through withdrawals. It's like, where's my sugar? I need it. That's what the cravings are. But after a while, we can train your gut bacteria to live off different types of food. So when you talk about cravings, what it actually is, it's the bacteria in your gut sending a signal to your brain saying, we want more of that food, right? So that's how I explain cravings to people. It's actually the bacteria in your body talking. So if you can, it's like you waging a battle against the bacteria in your gut. And then as soon as you start feeding healthy food and it gets used to that, then all of a sudden it goes, yes, I'd rather be having fruit or vegetables or blueberries or whatever rather than chocolate or sugar. Okay?
Yeah.
So it's a really interesting concept, the whole concept of how the gut, because the gut actually sends hormone signals back to the brain. That's where it tells you, oh, we're hungry, we're craving this.
Yeah,
that's what it's used to eating. The last one, guys, is look for foods high in protein and fiber. If you start with protein and fiber in your meals, you're always going to be eating healthier. You're always going to be eating lower calories. You're going to be on the right path to losing weight. Okay. So if I start with protein, say a steak, if I start with fiber, say leafy green vegetables, that's where I start. And then anything else that comes from there can be a bit of a bonus. Yeah. So they're the things that I always think about. How do I build a meal? Most people, when they build a meal, they think about the carbohydrate first, don't they? They think about, what am I going to put on my pasta? Rather than, I'm going to start with a steak or a piece of fish or a piece of chicken and vegetables, and then I might think about pasta or rice at the end if I need it, right? So it's changing that concept, that mindset around food. All right, last one, guys. Last one. So there's this website called eatforhealth.gov, okay? And you can take a look at it if you want. It's an Australian government website, and they have all these healthy calculators. And what you can do, you can plug in your age, you can plug in how active you are, you can plug in your exercise levels, and it kind of tells you how much you should be eating over the course of a day. So this is a very useful resource for a lot of people, okay? So the two advantages is, the first thing is this website allows you to calculate your daily energy needs based upon your BMR and your activity levels. Now, do you guys know what your BMR is?
Where do we put this, sorry, mate?
This is, so there should be advantages and disadvantages.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So the blue ones are the advantages, yeah? Logan, do you know what BMR means? What your BMR is?
Your BMR, is that your body, something to do with your body, your basal metabolic rate?
Perfect, yeah, basal metabolic rate. So what that stands for, what that means is your metabolic rate is essentially how many calories does your body burn every day to keep you alive, right? So if you were to lay in bed literally all day and not move a muscle, how many calories would your body still burn to keep your organs going, to keep your brain going, to keep your heart pumping, to keep your lungs working, etc., right? Okay, what most people don't realize is that actually accounts for about 60% of the total amount of calories that we burn each day. Okay, and one of the big things that determines your metabolic rate is how much muscle you have, right? Another good thing to explain to your clients, muscle is active tissue. Fat is passive tissue, right? Muscle is tissue that moves your body. So it requires energy, right? If we don't feed our muscles, we're going to lose our muscle, right? So people with high levels of muscle mass have a higher metabolic rate, which means they need to eat more to maintain their weight. That makes sense, doesn't it, right?
Yeah.
Whereas people that have very low levels of muscle, they don't need to eat that much because they don't need to fuel that lower level of muscle, especially if they're carrying all this extra fat. Okay. There was a famous experiment where they had a guy in America that I think was 300 kilos. I think he was 660 pounds, right? And they literally took him into a hospital and they fasted him for 365 days. He did not eat for a year. Now, most people go, now, yeah, 100%. Now, most people go, oh, you die after 30 days or whatever. He was so overweight. He had so much stored energy that he literally did not eat for 365 days. And he lost like 200 kilos.
Man, I would have thought that would have been toxic.
No. What they were doing, they were giving him water and they were giving him vitamin injections and they were like giving him all the basic stuff he needed, like all the vitamins and minerals. But literally what that experiment was to show that your body has fat is stored energy and you can use that as fuel. It's pretty crazy. So the more muscle you have, the more calories you need. And obviously if you're more active, you need more calories as well. And then the second benefit is it allows you to see the average number of serves per day of each food group. So you'll say, I'm a 35-year-old male, I'm 6'5", I weigh 100 kilos, I'm an active person, and they'll say, okay, you need to eat 6 serves of vegetables, 3 serves of fruit, 5 serves of grains, 5 serves of dairy, 4 serves of meat, etc., okay? So there's some of the advantages of this calculator, okay? Now, some of the disadvantages, I went on and took a quick look at it, is the first thing is that the advice is very generalized. So it doesn't take into account specific nutritional requirements. So if you're an athlete or if you're very active, these sorts of things don't really work for you. Yeah. It's like BMI, yeah, guys? Like if you've got lots of muscle, BMI will tell you that you're overweight or obese.
Yeah.
Right? So it's like a useless it's like a useless tool for you. So if you're an athlete, this one's not a very useful tool. And the last thing is there was no specific information provided for special conditions or diets. So for example, there was no information about vegetarian people, celiac, if you were trying to do keto, if you're trying to do low carb, there was no specific information on that as well.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that's just an analysis of that Eat for Health calculator. Guys, probably not something you really need to take a look at. That's it. We're done.